welcome back to the Lighthouse Addictions Topic Show. We are here every Thursday at 3 p.m. on www.facebook.com/lighthousetreatment. I'm your host for today. My name is Joe. Every week I sit down with various members of our facility and individuals with a strong recovery background or with extensive knowledge in the recovery process. And the purpose of this show is to provide our audience, which is you, with information and answers to your questions regarding treatment for substance abuse and general addiction issues. Please don't forget to like and share this video. Remember that sharing this video may help someone suffering from an alcohol or addiction problem and may give them the courage to reach out. And if you'd like to view more live videos like this, please like, visit, and follow our Facebook page. It is Lighthouse Treatment Center. And if you have any questions or comments during the show, feel free to leave a comment section below. We will try our best to answer your questions or give you a shout out while we are live. And in the spirit of Valentine's, our topic today is relationships in recovery. And I am very excited to have with us today Andrew. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what is your role here at the Lighthouse?
Sure. My name is Andrew, and I am one of the therapists over here at the Lighthouse.
Awesome. And how long have you worked with our company? And could you share with us some of your most happiest moments here?
Sure. I've been here with the company for 2 years, coming up in April.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you didn't realize how long it's been having you. And actually, ironically, or maybe appropriately, some of my happiest and best moments are when I was previously running our weekly family group on Saturdays, and just being able to spend time with the families and the loved ones and the addicts themselves, and being able to instill hope in them.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the biggest thing that especially a lot of loved ones are struggling with, is, you know, having hope anymore. And so I like to feel that if at the end of the day, with the loved ones and with the addicts themselves, if we can instill hope that change is still possible, then that's a good day. So,
absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know in all relationships, boundaries are an important aspect in determining the health and quality of a relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or between family members. Mm-hmm. What are some healthy personal boundaries?
Sure. Well, the first thing to keep in mind, too, is what actually are a boundary, right? We talk about these a lot in relationships, but not everyone knows what they are. So the first thing that everyone's familiar with is physical boundaries, right? Literally how much space we let someone in physically towards us, you know? And if someone crosses that boundary, maybe before that relationship feels appropriate, we feel uncomfortable, right? It causes some distress. Your
personal space.
Yeah, we talk about the bubble, right? Everyone's exactly. got our different bubble. Well, boundaries in relationships are the same idea, but emotionally. How much we let someone in emotionally, how much influence we let them have on our lives, how much we've let them in, or maybe we try not to let them in, and those boundaries get crossed. And so that's ultimately what we're talking about when we're talking about boundaries. So healthy ones are essentially ones that are very clear, right? You know, I make a very clear statement that if you cross this boundary, this is where my line is, and if you cross this, there's going to be some kind of consequence, right? And if there's repeated crossing, then I'm not going to be okay with that. There's going to be some response. And so making sure they're really clear, because at the end of the day, they're essentially a contract with the other person. You know, I'm okay with you coming this close, and then we'll be okay. So.
Absolutely. So could you give us some examples of what unhealthy boundaries look like between people?
Sure. Well, by the very nature of healthy ones being ones that are very clear, unhealthy ones could be ones that are very unclear, right? Maybe the line is constantly shifting, or the consequence is sometimes there, or sometimes it's not. And so the person you're in a relationship with doesn't know. Maybe there can be a lot of confusion there. And then obviously in recovery, one thing that we talk about a lot is the idea of enabling. And with enabling, that comes along with essentially the boundary may exist, but the consequences are never followed through with, right? So when someone crosses that, there's no response. So the person whose boundaries crossed is, you know, upset emotionally, but the person who's crossing it has no idea
because of the blurred lines between
exactly. And so that allows the boundary to continue to be crossed over and over and over, and just creates a lot of poisonousness in the relationship.
Thank you so much. And why are personal boundaries important when it comes to recovery?
Well, one, because the nature of addiction is such that relationships have gotten hurt, right? There's going to be emotional hurt, there's going to be broken trust, this kind of thing. And so those boundaries have gotten very muddled, right? There's all over the place, and there's not a lot of clarity or even consistency in the relationship. So making that much clearer. And that's definitely when it comes to, back to enabling, as we said, the problem is it feeds into the standard kind of mindset of someone active in addiction, which is the manipulation that tends to come in, and it lets that person not sense the consequences of their actions, right? That's the real negative of it, is that it protects the person from the natural consequences of their actions. And when that happens, people don't have a motivation to change, right? They just continue doing what they're doing. And so making sure, redefining those boundaries in a healthy way, making sure you know what yours are and making them consistent helps kind of start to repair and retrain that relationship in a healthier way.
Thank you so much. I'm actually learning a lot today. And what are some characteristics of a healthy love? Well, I know, healthy love would include trust, right?
Absolutely.
Communication.
I would say just in general, equality.
Quality.
Right? Yeah. Both a give and a take on both sides, right? Obviously, love is work. There's going to be work involved, but on the whole, it's adding to the person's life, right? It's not taking away from. Both people are willing to come together to the relationship equally and both put in the same amount of work and both benefit from that. There's literally the joining of that. And so that would be one of the clearest characteristics of a healthy love.
Aww. What are some characteristics of an unhealthy love? What would distrust? That's a big one.
Of course, right? Yeah.
Lack of honesty between each other.
Yeah, the breaking of that, right? The breaking of that agreement and that promise that the two people have had. And again, if equality is healthy, inequality would be unhealthy, right? Maybe one person is putting in all the work, right? And the other person's really not engaged. Or the one person is giving, the other one's just taking, right? And to the extreme, it becomes even abusive. So finding that mutual respect.
Respect, yes.
I think, really what it comes down to.
That right now.
So when there's that respect there and appreciation for the other person, that's when it's healthy. And when that gets lost, it can become very, very destructive, actually.
Thank you. I remember once in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, somebody shared that underneath the surface of an alcoholic or an addict, you'll find a codependent person most times. What is codependency and what does it look like?
Sure. Codependency is one of those words that we throw around a lot, but we don't always sit down and actually define. At its core, codependency is a loss of identity, right? Codependency is I no longer have my individual self. It's lost in the relationship with the other person. So much so that my entire sense of identity, my entire sense of happiness and well-being is dependent on that relationship in some way. So there's no longer I can care for myself. I have to make sure that person cares for me, or that person is well treated or happy, or that whatever they're going through, that's how I define who I am.
So you're prioritizing your partner, and you're sacrificing your own self-care and your own well-being. Absolutely.
And so, if you took that person away, someone who's codependent becomes very worried and distressed because
they don't know what to do.
They don't know who they are,
and
right?
they don't know what to do.
Then they don't know what to do, exactly. And so that's why you sometimes see people who struggle with codependency grabbing on to any relationship they can, because it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be,
between family members.
Family members, absolutely.
Friends, yeah.
Absolutely. And so you'll see them latching on to these different relationships because they need it to even know that they're okay.
That is so crazy. But yeah, thank you. And earlier I asked my Facebook friends if they had any questions for our interview today, and my friend Billy asked, we always hear others telling us when it's time to bring a new person into our lives. But to you personally, what do you think the answer is of when it's okay to begin dating again, and what circumstances play a role in this? And I think he's referring to dating again when you're in recovery. And in a 12-step program, it is suggested that you wait a minimum of 1 year to even consider dating again. In my own opinion, regardless of whatever program you utilize in your recovery, I would suggest seeking the advice of a sponsor or a mentor. And these are the people that are supposed to help guide you through your new experience. And they can also help you determine whether or not you're in a good position to engage in a new relationship. So, Andrew, what do you think?
What do I mean? Well, I definitely like the year as a good kind of guideline. You know, I mean, it's a really good kind of baseline to go for. But I definitely agree with what you're saying, which is, I mean, you know, everyone's different, but the idea of don't necessarily make that decision in a vacuum, right? Don't do it, try it all on your own. Seek the advice of others around you, because stepping into a relationship, if you think about it, even the best relationships, even the healthiest relationships are stressful at times, right? And take work, as we all know, right? You know, even the really good ones, I mean, there's effort involved. And so, especially for someone early in recovery, that's going to be a new trigger, you know? And you're just trying to get settled now. And you're still just refiguring out who you are as a sober person, right? You're rediscovering your identity, redefining yourself. And so then trying to take that turmoil and you know, indecision and faultiness into a relationship is just going to magnify that. Well, you know, obviously you hear the stories of people who you know, meet each other and stuff, and you know, sometimes it works out, but why take the risk, right? If the person's really that great of a person, they'll be around for a while, and that just gives you maybe even more time to really learn who they are as a person before you enter that step. So
and also that gives you time to work on yourself a little bit
more. Which is what you should be doing. Learn
and develop more coping skills, so when the stresses of a relationship, you encounter those stresses, you're better able to deal with them. And from my own experience, I've seen people in recovery subconsciously or even consciously sabotage their personal relationships with a loved one, and this is usually caused or due to fear, lack of coping skills, or inability to relate or become vulnerable with others. In your own opinion, what are some healthy techniques to rebuild or mend those healthy relationships?
The first piece of advice I can give anyone early in recovery is, when it comes to your loved ones, have patience.
Oh yeah,
that's
a big one. And vice versa.
Ideally, you know, but trust has been broken, right? I mean, that's the nature of addiction, is trust has been broken, feelings have been hurt. And one of the things that people in recovery have a struggle with very early on is they get very frustrated because the relationship doesn't magically change, right? It's not suddenly better now that I'm okay.
It definitely takes time and effort.
It takes time and effort. And one of the big things is you are with yourself 24/7, right? You know perfectly well if you are doing okay or if you're not. The people around you, your loved ones, they don't have that privilege, right? So there's always going to be some worry there. There's always going to be some concern there. And so the more you can have patience with them and understand that it's going to be a process, and then part of that too is the more you can bring them into your recovery, right? Let them see what you're doing. Be clear, be honest and open about your actions. Let them know how you're, what are you doing to do better? Are you meeting up with your sponsor? Are you going to meetings? Be transparent, because that's going to take some of that edge off, right?
Yeah. So just touching on that, how do you feel about people new in recovery? Do you feel like they should disclose to all of their family members or friends? I'm just curious.
I would say I never like the word all, right? That's always a scary thing. That's something you're going to have to kind of make on a case-by-case basis. And again, don't make that decision alone in a vacuum. You know, bring others in. More support is never bad, but you know, you don't necessarily want to just be advertising everything out there in the world, because that exposes you a lot, and especially early on, you might not be ready for some of that feedback.
That's true.
So, I mean, some people are already going to know, and so those are the ones there that they're probably going to be the ones most worried. But there is a time and a place. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis. You kind of have to feel it out, and depending on the nature of the relationship and what they may or may not already know. But the last piece of advice I can really give for mending relationships too, and this is something I always like to do when I'm working with families or I'm working with couples, is the first part of the session is always kind of going through the hurts and those things, but I always like to end the session with identifying one clear positive thing that you want to add back into the relationship. Something simple, but something clear, something obvious. Like Friday nights, we get to dinner, we sit down, turn our cell phones off, and just spend time together.
Yeah.
Or Saturdays, we go to the mall and walk around like we used to, right? Something small but very doable that both people want to bring back in. Because that's going to be those stepping stones back to rebuilding the relationship to where you want it to be. And those are the small things that start to rebuild the relationship, rebuild the intimacy, and really get you back on track. But it is a process. So.
Sounds like some great advice. I actually might take you up on that.
You didn't realize how much you were going to learn today.
We need more quality time. Let's build our relationship a little bit more.
I'll schedule you in.
I don't mean to be rude by looking at my phone, but we are live right now, and I see that we do have a... It's not showing up on my phone. Sorry. So we have a comment. 1 second. Oh, hi, Darren. Darren says hi, Joe and Andrew.
Hello.
Hi. So yeah, just remember that if we are live, you're welcome to comment below and give us a shout out, ask any questions that you want covered, or anything like that. And if we're not able to answer your questions while we're live, we'll save it for next week and try to answer it then. Andrew, do you have anything else you would like to say regarding relationships and recovery?
Sure. Probably one great thing I can kind of say is I thought about it a lot, and I realized the single best piece of advice that I can give the loved ones of those who struggle with addiction is this, which is get your own support.
Aww.
Whether it's Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Families Anonymous, your own therapy, just even going out and doing things fun for yourself again, right? It's so easy to get lost in the other person's needs.
Yeah, get consumed.
Consumed is the correct word for it, absolutely. That you lose sight of taking care of yourself. And everything else that we discuss, whether it's communication, conflict resolution, boundaries, all of that stems from you being in a healthy place, right? And if you can do that, everything else becomes a lot easier. And the same is true for those who struggle with addiction, right? You get so worried about, what are my family going to think? How do I help them? These, that. If you take care of yourself and they take care of themselves, everything's going to be 1,000 times easier. And ultimately, that's the only thing we can really control anyway. We can't change the other people, no matter how much we might have tried to. We can't change them. And so taking care of ourselves is ultimately the only thing that we really can control. So, and you deserve it anyway.
Oh, well, do you hear that, guys? Self-care is number one. Like I was just telling some of the clients earlier today, you're not going to be able to love others unless you really take care and learn to love yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think a big factor in that is self-care.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I just wanted to remind you all that we are here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Facebook.com/Lighthouse Treatment. And we were here today with the wonderful Andrew. And see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.